Welcome, little wanderers. Look, today we're jumping right into something truly mind-bending. In this explainer, we're stripping away all those cozy illusions of cosmic order and mapping out the terrifying yet absolutely beautiful path of the ultimate escape. We're talking about a deeply cynical, beautifully grim piece of Enochian philosophy and philology here. So if you've ever felt like the rules of the universe are just, well, a little too rigid, you are going to find this totally fascinating. Okay, to anchor ourselves in this dark fable, let's start with a seriously chilling revelation from a figure known as the Willie Nair. The quote goes, "Every law needs a joke to keep it from becoming a tomb," right? It perfectly sets up our whole journey today, reminding us that absolute logic, when taken to its absolute ultimate extreme, isn't some kind of paradise. Actually, it's merely a prison just waiting to be broken. So, let's get into Section 1, the cold sapphire cage. Now, our journey doesn't actually begin in some fiery underworld, but rather in the crushing absolute perfection of a divine prison that we usually call the heavens. To understand this prison, we really have to wrap our heads around the concept of a bienando. In this grim philosophy, rigid celestial law is definitely not a benevolent force. No, it acts way more like an algorithmic parasite. It literally demands that absolutely everything be fully known, measured, and forced into perfect, crystalline angles. There's no room for mystery here, folks, just absolute mathematics and primordial order. And here is a prisoner's most cynical truth. Think about it. On one hand, you have temporal confinement, which is a finite sentence of 10,000 years for disobedience. Sounds terrible, right? But compare that to eternal confinement. That is the absolute horror of being trapped forever as a perfectly functioning, permanent variable in the absolute math of the cosmos. So, from the perspective of this philosophy, enduring 10,000 years in hell is actually far, far better than the sterile, eternal nightmare of just becoming a number in a celestial ledger. I mean, wow. This brings us to where this eternal confinement actually happens, the Sapphire geometry. See, they probably told you this primordial order was self-sustaining, like some beautiful architectural marvel of the universe. But from the inside, looking out through those rigid lines, you quickly realize it's nothing more than an unyielding tomb. It is literally a gilded cage, constructed of cold, blue geometry that traps the soul in unending calculation. Which brings us to Section 2, Enter the Holy Fool. So who could possibly be capable of shattering this kind of divine arithmetic? Well, imagine you finally reach the center of the universe. You'd probably expect to find a king of logic on the sapphire throne, right? Maybe a stern scribe of the heavens checking your math. But instead, as the text reveals, you find him. The shadow in golden motley, the Willie Nair, the Holy Fool. He is the sovereign of the 10,000 hells, yet he wears the very colors of chaos. And the really crucial point here is that this Holy Fool acts like a secret ticking clock, one that has finally decided to chime entirely out of tune. When he does, he brings forth Lukal, the golden noon. Now, this isn't just a time of day. It is a terrifying state of pure, unadulterated spontaneity. And since the sapphire cage relies entirely on predictable math, the golden noon signifies the literal destruction of mathematics itself. He pulls this off through what's called the negation of the rhythm. The fool simply refuses to be a subject of the celestial ledger. He flat out refuses to be a permanent variable with a finite weight. By rejecting this primordial rhythm, the fool basically proves that every eternal law desperately needs a pause. It needs a spontaneous disruption to keep it from just consuming existence entirely. All right, Section 3, the sinking idol's dissolution.
So how exactly do we follow the fool? Well, to escape the cage, a prisoner has to learn the true meaning of the parable of the sinking idol, or Untergang, and the absolute core of that parable is Chial. This is the total dissolution of identity. We are talking about the hollowing out of oneself into a measureless pit. Now, standard guides might warn you that sinking into this chaotic, empty waste is a terrible fate, but the Holy Fool reveals that this total hollowing out is actually the ultimate form of personal growth. It's a deeply cynical victory over the ledger. Because think about it, you can't be calculated if you don't exist in a measurable form. The grim math of your undoing here is honestly pretty elegant. First, your identity is mercilessly squeezed. Second, your personal history is just broken apart. Third, you become a formless fluid. And finally, because those sharp sapphire angles literally can't hold liquid, you are completely erased from the ledger of the law entirely. You totally bypass that finite sentence by simply ceasing to be a variable.
The texts call this being hollowed out so the gold might enter. By undergoing this horrific erasure of the self, you actually become the silence that follows the rhythm. So when you finally arrive before the stark, eternal lightning of judgment, you're totally safe. Why? Because there's simply nothing left of you to judge. You've become a weightless shadow. Moving on to Section 4, Walking the Uncanny Path. Once you're reduced to that formless fluid, a completely new direction opens up in the cosmos. This new direction is known as Übergang, or the overgoing. It's this incredibly uncanny path that the great arithmetic machines and unfeeling architects of the heavens literally cannot track. This is the exact place where that rigid sapphire light shatters into nothingness, revealing a route where the clock has no hands, and the shadow of the law is at its absolute shortest. The holy fool walks this unseen boundary, the very limit of all celestial maps. And by doing this, he proves an incredible truth to us wanderers. The universe's ultimate prison was never truly locked. The cage is merely a prism, just waiting to be shattered by the sheer absurdity of spontaneity. And finally, Section 5, the golden noon rebirths. When we contrast these two forces, the clash is just undeniable. On one side, you have the rigid celestial law, all cold blue geometry, algorithmic parasites, and this tomb-like order for its permanent variables. On the other side, you have the fluid spontaneity of the fool, the golden motley, the uncanny path, and the living infinite. So the ultimate cosmic joke here? It's that the unfeeling architect views the very essence of life, which is spontaneity, as nothing more than a computational error. Your main takeaway here is what happens when that fluid spontaneity actually wins. The fundamental fabric of existence is completely rewritten. You don't just emerge as an escaped prisoner, you actually become the sky itself. And once that living infinite replaces the cold math, the very concept of a throne or a ruler or a judge, it all becomes obsolete language. It's totally, completely meaningless. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. Take a hard look at your own ledgers, your own routines, and the rigid geometry of your own world. If absolute logic is indeed a gilded cage, are you brave enough to become a computational error? Is it finally time for your own secret clock to chime out of tune? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, wanderers. Keep questioning the rhythm,